Hey there, did you know that your entire life, everything you've ever lived and strived for, is a lie? That's right. Haven't you wondered about the second Earth in the sky? The monsters, the catacombs carved deep beneath the surface that are found under every public government facility? It's all real, and everybody's just been keeping this big secret from you, keeping you in the dark, concealing their otherworldly abilities. But I wouldn't do that. I'm here to open your eyes and your skull. Now, hold still. I'm pretty confident with this hammer, but I'd hate to miss. Why are you backing away? I said hold still. You're not listening. Stop moving. Stop struggling. I said stop moving. Welcome to the wonderfully strange creation that is Psychopomp Gold, a game by Carbonic, the solo developer for Fading Club, who also happened to make another game, DREAMWILD, of which I've also made a video on. But that's besides the point. Allow me to introduce to you the main character of this silly little game. We don't really know her name, so let's just go with Pompey. She's a completely normal and well-adjusted individual who believes that everyone else on Earth has special powers, and they've all been keeping it a secret from her. The usual thoughts the average person might have while staring up at the second Earth in the sky. Naturally, she won't stand for this, so she's built a device, or the machine that lets me read people's minds when I want to, as she calls it. Now, if you take the first letter of every word in that rather lengthy title, it very clearly spells out Psychopomp, obviously, which is the name she's given this strange helmet of sorts, pieced together with objects of power like satellite dishes and religious symbols. However, after putting it on, it doesn't quite give the desired effect. Instead, it allows her to perceive another world, one that was kept a secret from her by everyone else. A world that exists right alongside the one she knew, filled with all sorts of animals, creatures, and dead bodies. There are catacombs hidden under every public government building. I will not allow any more secrets to be kept from me. The journey begins in a rather unassuming alleyway, a perfect place to get a feel for the movement, like a drugged-up junkie relearning how to walk after frying their nerves, moving forward and backwards, turning left or right, and even strafing to the sides if you're feeling crabby, with the ability to hold down control to look around, so you can really drink in the immaculate vibes of this dingy, dirty back alley. After picking up a key, we'll encounter our first individual, a nondescript girl who will be an excellent example on how you may interact with this weird and wonderful world. You may look with your eyes, touch with your hands, listen with your ears, and most importantly, brutally bash things into a bloody pulp with your trusty hammer. This series of actions can be done with just about every NPC in the game, though I'd suggest bashing last, as it's rather difficult to properly observe or to communicate with a red stain on the floor. And remember, people lie. They lie with their words, their actions, to misguide and use you, to take advantage of what makes you special. Hey, a dog! Who's a good boy? You're a good boy, aren't you? Can you speak? Speak, boy, speak. That's it, speak.
Don't idle here. You have much to do. Don't worry, for there is a plan to everything. I'm sure you will see in due time, my friend.
And thus we find ourselves in the world map, with 3 destinations to choose from, all of which are funded and or owned by the government. Of course, there are 2 other options, but those will come later. And with the destinations conveniently numbered, we'll start with the sewage treatment facility, of which entering is made a breeze because, as everyone knows, hammers have the type advantage over locks and windows. Inside, we see water being processed and cleaned until it's once more fit for human consumption. Chemicals added to chemicals to remove chemicals. And yet further along is an elevator leading straight down into this tainted wastewater. What kind of sick, twisted secrets can be found down below? This may seem like a regular sewer at first, but don't be fooled. Through it flows pure deceit and lies. Metaphorically, I think that's just dirty water down there. There's this weird stock creature which lashes out if you try and touch it, and this is also where enemies will begin to appear. Freakish abominations that can't be reasoned with, can't be observed. They deserve nothing less than rapid and efficiently executed blunt force trauma. Additionally, there's a group of thraits standing by this assumedly bottomless pit. An all-female species with strange animal-like features and impressive proportions, who are relatively neutral if not a bit cautious of us, though I can't imagine why they'd be wary of our lovable main character. Also nearby is a wall that gives pseudo-vibes. Not sure if it's the rough appearance, the hollow sound, or the fact it's bleeding all over the floor. And if it can bleed, it can die. There's many a fake wall to be found in this game, and behind this one is a strange entity, the Symbolic Man. He says some nonsense about how everything returns to symbols in the end, but he is enjoyable to touch. There's also some delectable red sewer needles, and this note that's filled with scientific jargon. Concerns about the second Earth in the sky, how our own Earth appears smaller in size, etc., etc. I honestly zoned out once they pulled out the big words like this and sense. Further into these sewer tunnels is a locked door, and past that is this hateable little bastard who wiggles and dances in an annoying way. He's received a key from his queen, and he'd be so mad he might just explode if someone took it. Well, turns out he wasn't kidding. Wretched little thing packs quite a punch too, so if you hadn't already, because he's so goddamn annoying, best to turn him into a fine red paste before he does it himself. The key unlocks the door and gives a chance to meet the aforementioned queen, a terrifying pulsing mass of flesh with a cutesy anime-esque face, accompanied by two royal nuggets with smaller but similar appearances. The queen is fed human byproduct and converts it into tasty flesh and milk for the nuggets. She was a good queen, but all good queens must eventually be recycled, using the comically large guillotine hanging above her. The provided key opens a door which leads to a lever that conveniently lifts a bridge across the large pit. On the way over, another fake wall gives way to a strange key with an eyeball symbol. Perhaps it's a special tool that'll help us later. And here's a diary entry of sorts, with a lovely, smiling self-portrait. Getting further sidetracked, there's what appears to be a church, with a very lickable concrete statue with striking wings. The Thraite woman behind the building says this holy place has been overrun with sparkling-eyed freaks. She also doesn't let me pull her hair. How very rude of her. Finally crossing the bridge, there's yet another lever, and the echoing scream after it's pulled tells me we've successfully imitated a French Revolution. Unfortunately, the Thraite woman who'd been searching for food was not as lucky in finding what she needed. Returning to the now beheaded queen, there's a strange floating object. It's a very special egg of the earth, something we'll be seeking out in each location going forward. And speaking of going forward, it's onwards to the Children's Hospital, a place that feels safe, but is truly the exact opposite. They'll pump you full of diseases, incurable illnesses. They'll cut you open and make others feel good about it, all while that lovely scent of bleach and Elmer's glue hangs in the air. And yet the smell of rust and petrol cuts through the sanitized hospital ambience, like the elevator is calling out to us, a call that must be accepted. Welcome to the lower wing, where the eternal nurses attend to and preserve important individuals of humankind. They're kept healthy by siphoning nutrients and meat from the patients on the surface, while stimulated with their favorite desires, like the great philosopher Plato, surrounded by the joyous sounds of children at play. Perhaps he enjoys children a bit too much. He admits that cave stuff was utter nonsense though, and admitting when you're wrong is a redeemable quality. We then have Alexander the Great, accompanied by the sights and sounds of war and battle. He'd do anything to feel another man's blood again. What did he mean by that? And finally, the Queen of Egypt herself, Cleopatra, in a room filled with nothing but praise and the sounds of people agreeing with her. Sort of like a chamber with an obnoxious echo. And there's even more important figures still growing, festering within these side rooms. Once they've grown enough, they too will receive a larger room. One can only imagine what great icons of humanity lie behind these doors. Presidents, kings, the guy who invented those little bread tabs, all very important to the advancement of humanity. Unfortunately, I don't find pleasure in touching any of them, and believe their squirming needs to cease. Some nurses around the area hold keycards, which we'll have to politely ask for, to gain access to rooms below the historical figures in order to unplug them. In the room beneath Cleopatra is an imposter wall, giving way to one of the doctors, along with another strange key. The nurse nearby is also gazing out at a familiar-looking moon, if that is what it truly is. Please go play DreamWild. Seriously. Looking around further, one can also find this paper discussing the discovery of text that describes two enigmatic figures, Saveshna Vishniri, the Queen of Venus, and Krusner Colvin, the King of Mercury. There were also ancient textiles found that depicted these beings creating the heavenly bodies and weaving the universe, along with the fact their names seem to reference the two fictitious planets of Venus and Mercury, of which they held dominion over. That's certainly odd. Those are two very real planets to my knowledge, and a possible connection to Christianity, I guess. Near this paper is yet another fake wall, behind which is a former businessman who underwent extensive surgery to become a free-floating cochlea, aka the iconic snail in your ear that whispers cryptic secrets to you. If yours is cool, that is. Anyways, good for you, pal. Keep living your dream. Past that is a group of nurses tending to a disgustingly large parasite embedded into the wall itself, that seemingly was made from an unwilling young teacher from Berlin. She's now pumped full of dopamine 24/7 to keep her chugging along. As one does. The last thing of note is the strange voice behind this wall. Pressing up against it, a series of words and numbers can be heard on loop.
1, 7, 8, dream, open, close, 2, 7, 4, 3, R, 5, 2, 0, open, end.
Now, if you take these numbers and the first letter of each word, you'll quickly realize it spells out Psychopomp. I'm kidding. But if you visit the official Fading Club website and scroll down to the bottom of this page, you might notice something. Open end. You can now take the remaining numbers and first letter of each word to make a code, giving access to the fun poem. A poem all about having fun. Or you can skip all that by just adding /fun to the website URL. But don't type anything else, or you'll end up in the goblin hole. With all that out of the way, we can finally flip the switches and shut off the wiggling masses, silencing these squirming relics of history, and granting access to yet another egg of the earth. Naturally, that leaves just one location, the public school, a place of learning and knowledge. When one sleeps in school, they learn new things. When Pompey sleeps in school, she tastes new things. You should try it. Maybe you'll feel new things, like the cold metal of cuffs around your wrist as you're arrested for illegally entering school grounds at night. Idiot. No, the sewage treatment plant had the sewers beneath it, and the hospital had a secret lower wing. So by that logic, the public school will of course have a factory with strange medallion men hard at work doing something, and the head of production who begs us to kill him soon after we step out of the elevator. A paper nearby speaks of the stars and planets in the sky, and someone has rudely scribbled on the page and called them stupid. There's also wanted posters for us. Seems like word of our generous acts of philanthropy have been going around. We've been asked to disable the safeguards for the machine that'll crush the head of production's head, which exists for some strange reason. We'll have to narrowly avoid being flattened like a pancake. Don't worry, I can say that. It's not racist. By these crushers and fighting off the strange gear beasts that inhabit this location to reach the controls. While doing so, this medallion man speaks of the parasitic enamel they nurture and grow to maturity before applying it to the children's teeth above. It'll listen to what they say, and this data can then be fed into a generative model to create more lessons for the school children. The future of AI is truly bright. Meanwhile, this medallion man is guarding the controls, because the head of production's attempts to off himself seem to be a common occurrence. He's dealt with accordingly. The other set of controls are also guarded, though not quite as well. Who's the dumbass now? Stupid. And nearby is of course the furnace, where small children who have outlasted their usefulness are melted down into slag and turned into butter knives and egg slicers. Recycling is a wonderful thing. Last on the list is reaching the PSI control center. More importantly though is that nearby is another fake wall, with yet another special key. But back to the terminal, did you know it takes a minimum 500 psi to crush a skull. Isn't that just neat? Now I thought it'd be funny to set the machine to exactly 499 psi. Yet the joke was on me because I then had to walk all the way back to the controls, and the movement isn't exactly fast. On that note, here's a fun fact. While speedrunning the game, players discovered they could sprint infinitely while strafing. Finding this funny, and through the power of democracy, the dev kept it in, meaning the most efficient method of movement is crab walking through the entire level. All things truly do evolve into crab. That fun little bit of knowledge aside, the head of production will now be guest starring in the latest bit of hydraulic press YouTube slop content, and we get to receive yet another Egg of the Earth. With all 3 locations thoroughly explored, the option to descend is now available. But we're not quite done with this lair just yet. During our journey, a variety of different locations would seemingly fade in and out of the world map, and these transient locations hold many secrets, with no better start than the starting point. It's a temple-like structure with a massive cocoon that, according to the distraught Thread nearby, housed their queen, who hatched when they weren't looking. She's worried that some vermin dogs would find the queen and lead her astray. Next is the Thread village, likely the same village that one Thread looking for food in the sewers was talking about. Threads, both young and old, were forced underground where the humans began to populate the earth, forced to rely on rats and the occasional old hamburger for food. One Thread even says she watched a human get hit by a car, with nothing but dust and clay spilling out. There's also strange murals on the wall, with one such mural featuring some rather familiar symbols. Now, the most noteworthy location is likely the location with no name. It has 2 orbs floating and speaking to each other, seemingly acting as a messaging system for 2 individuals. One of them is keeping watch over a certain queen, who's awake but hiding, remaining dormant. Meanwhile, the other is located in some sort of desert, watching over the still slumbering king, who must remain sleeping, as dealing with both would be less than ideal. Now, we know of only one recently awakened queen, being the one from the cocoon that the Threads worship, and also only one pairing of king and queen, being the Queen of Venus and the King of Mercury, further confirmed by that imagery in the Thread village, which features the symbols of the 2, though perhaps in their correct orientation, revealing them to be the alchemical symbols for copper and quicksilver, which correspond to the planets Venus and Mercury. Additionally, the identity of at least one of the individuals can be roughly guessed. He's the best of all boys, the king of all good boys, and he'll be getting a big bone later, a fitting reward for the king of all dogs. Perhaps most strange of all, though, is the mysterious figure watching over this whole conversation, watching us. The final location is, of course, Daddy's Bad Place, which is surprisingly not a Discord VC with only 1 slot. Not now, kitten. Daddy is fucking losing it. It's a rather normal room, or would be if it wasn't crumbling into the void. There's a cross on the wall, but the most interesting thing is the TV cabinet. The television powers on and begins to play what sounds like an emergency broadcast.
Repeat. At 3:45 a.m. today, a state of emergency was declared following the appearance of a large unknown insect-like creature in the Melnit borough of Central City. The creature is unpredictable and is considered to be highly dangerous. This is not a drill. If you are inside, stay inside. If you are outside, find the nearest shelter. If you are thinking, stop thinking. The insect may appear to you as a human. It is not. It is an aberration of your imagination and does not exist. Stay away from the insect, as it is highly dangerous. Do not attempt to communicate with the insect, as it is highly dangerous. The insect is not real. The insect is not real. The insect is not real.
Well, that's about the level of strange we've come to expect. Who knows what any of that means? And that's all there is to discover on this lair, so it's time to descend. Once more, we're given a choice of locations, though they seem a bit strange this time, far removed from just a regular facility or government building like before. Speaking of buildings, the 4th location is sort of that. After going down what one might consider the throat of a building, we're greeted by a collection of strange red buildings floating in a vast red sea. Hey, the weird moon's back. These buildings are possibly constructed or even nurtured by these building beds, which are like bug beds, but for bugs. No, wait, that's not right. Unfortunately, it seems these young buildings are inflicted with a bad case of parasitic silkworms, which more importantly means that the way we're trying to go, the main root sphincter, is closed up. So I suppose it's time to play exterminator. We'll be scrambling eggs, battling monsters that are legs for days, and conversing with the strange inhabitants of this location, some of whom have very interesting desires. Did you know that when it's time for a building to reproduce and die, it'll release very special pheromones, or black mold, to repel its current hosts? So if you find any, just know the miracle of life is soon to occur. Another fun building fact is that graffiti is how they communicate, and this one appears to be crying out for help. So help it, we will, which will require an assortment of chemicals, like DDT or dichloro-diphenyl-trichloroethane, one of the first synthesized insecticides used in the 1940s, which is perfect for what we need, if you ignore the fact it was completely banned in multiple countries and restricted heavily in many others for environmental and health concerns. We've also got a healthy dose of sulfur and a touch of bromine. With all that sorted, we can make our way to the top of the buildings where the piss lipid boy is. That is the furthest thing from a little good boy, and it needs to be put down like a dog. Anyways, slap all those ingredients haphazardly into this machine right here and pump out some premium homemade insecticide, and probably commit a war crime or two in the process. But hey, the moths are gone and the sphincter is relaxed. Just make sure you stomp out every last egg you can find to open up this silk wall and grab the big green key before going down to see the great taproot. Every single building is simply a genetic clone of this beauty. I mean, where did you think buildings came from? The stork? Now it's very sensitive, so best to be careful around it. After causing the real estate market to collapse, both monetarily and literally, it's off to the next crazy catacomb, which is... Why, this place is... elevator. Welcome to instructions. Unsurprisingly, this is where instructions for everything are made, including you. And we're not just talking your DNA. Everything that has ever happened to you, everything that you've ever done, was all decided right here. That's right, even that incredibly embarrassing thing you did that one time. Now, much like the last location, there's a bit of a roadblock preventing further progress. A pesky, sentient teratoma has clogged up one of the pipes, as they're known to do. We'll take a DNA sample, but in order to know what to do with it and unlock the controls for this nearby console, we'll have to look around. So let's lower the gates and get to looking. After fighting this fleshy Plants vs. Zombies pea shooter, a staple enemy of this area, we can converse with a very rare origin point. This one is the origin that decides how you'll suffer. So if you've got like pollen allergies or some other debilitating thingy, blame this thing. And nearby this thing is the super secret glowy green key. We can also find not just one, but two of the locks for that control terminal in these conveniently numbered rooms. The final lock is probably on the other side, so away we go. We find yet another origin point, but this one handles decay, giving you just the right amount of flawed chromosomes, so your body breaks down until you're just a shell of your former self. And the last lock is here. But we're not done just yet, making a quick stop at the DNA library to do some light reading on the safe and unsafe ways of manipulating DNA. Very useful knowledge. And finally, we make our way past a rather unique trio, triplets. Our final stop is the DNA testing room, where we can, get this, test our DNA. Well, not our DNA, the DNA we obtained. With all that done, we can finally return to the now unlocked injector console, and with our newfound knowledge of DNA manipulation, cook up the most disturbed strain you've ever seen. I'm talking demon core radiation levels of genetic tomfuckery. And it works. It works amazingly well, in fact. The way forward is clear, and we've got a straight path right to the... oh, perhaps it worked too well. That incredibly distorted DNA might have gotten injected directly into the primordial information, where it spread to everything. It's all dying. There's nothing left. But hey, another egg of the earth acquired and tossed down a presumably bottomless hole. You gotta take those small wins. Now, much like the last layer, there's another couple of odd locations that are quite fleeting, ephemeral even, such as the Rust Mother Artificial Cave, where a group of Rust Mothers are hard at work producing rust. Shocking, I know. Suppose that explains the growing smell of rust and decay from the elevators and other locations. Then we've got the Hollow Nursery, which is even weirder. According to this thread here, the hollow constructs, these strange floating entities, have awakened to do the bidding of their queen, who is still nowhere to be found. We also see the same familiar statue from the church, with what appears to be a larger replica peering out from the darkness above. Now who's ready for a class trip to the Natural History Museum? We get to listen to the museum narrator really hype up the apparently extinct humans.
They were highly emotive, making them very fun.
While expressing clear disdain for the Thraits.
They were strong and stoic, which proved very annoying.
And the evolved humans are hard to make out in the dark, but we'll learn about them in the next location, which is of course the human seedbed. It's here that we see humans? Very poor imitations made of dust and clay, to be exact. You can tell because of the lack of blood when they're hammered. They're definitely not the brightest bunch at the moment, that's for sure, and it's probably best to not stick around for too long. This place gives me the creeps. After descending once more, we're presented with just a single location. This one is possibly the most abstract of the bunch, as it's straight up just symbols. Turns out that Symbolic Man was right. Everything returns to symbols in the end. We start off in what appears to be a hallway for either an office or maybe apartment building, complete with vending machines. Aren't they just adorable? And conveniently, the elevator is right here. That's definitely abnormal. Perhaps we've descended so deep there's simply no need for an elevator anymore. Or this whole location exists on a more spiritual or mental level. Regardless of the answer, it seems we're inadequate, according to this symbol person, and won't be able to progress further until we come to an understanding with this world and what makes it. So away we go. This quest for understanding will have us face many challenges, ranging from swinging axes, lasers, and of course the usual enemy encounters, except they're actually rather unusual. Like these strange, tubular flesh creatures that attack with magic rings, or this enemy that's straight out of a Legend of Zelda dungeon, complete with built-in flamethrowers. It's not all intense, heart-pumping action, though. Take a moment to speak with this location's mostly friendly inhabitants, except for this one, who loudly judges and views us as a usurper of some kind. At least the Catacombs are nice. One can also take a moment to soak in the horrifyingly cryptic displays within the museum. Artworks that seem to have some deep, disturbing meaning that can't quite be grasped, or sculptures that might allude to something far greater that is yet to be understood. And finally, any damage that accumulates while dealing with these obstacles and encounters can be washed away in these strange blue puddles, sharing similarities to the healing pool within the castle in DREAMWILD. I promise this is the last time I bring it up. Now, after enduring these trials and tribulations, we'll be given an audience with the Paragons. These are presumably also the four aspects, being what all matter is made up of, with the aspects themselves being made from the original two thinkers. There's the Paragon of symbols, feeling the geometry of the world, the colors and shapes, lines and curves, the digit meat stuff that makes you up. Then there's the Paragon of concepts, younger than the others yet far more ancient in its own mind. Concepts give birth to symbols, which in turn give birth to concepts. One without the other is worthless. You are a collection of flesh concepts. Next is the Paragon of people, the oldest, yet made up of the younger Paragons, existing before the others, yet the others are its parents. Layers building upon each other and looking back to comprehend the former layers. Finally is the Paragon of flesh, ancient and saddened from being an observer to billions of years worth of death and life. The flesh or meat of the body is our soul's given anchor. Now, naturally, in order to understand these four aspects and the world as a whole, we'll have to crack each Paragon open like a piñata in order to obtain a very special key. And while on the topic of keys, we can't forget to grab yet another strange glowing green key before opening up these four doors that give way to the final egg of the earth. We're almost there now, with a new location dubbed Entrance now available. But before we progress, we must stop to indulge in this layer's aberrant locations, with another four strange places that seem disconnected from time itself, not always existing on this plane. The first of which is Ancient Future Place, an oxymoron of sorts. This location's main focus is this mural, with the figures depicted most closely resembling characters from the developer's upcoming game Mechana, which could imply a connection between the two games, or just a fun reference. Then there's simply nature, a rather unnerving location with a single pathway bordered on both sides by the large head of birds chirping and crying out in a distorted yet harmonic way, at the end of which is another symbolic entity, the avatar of nature, which is seemingly a representation of humanity's natural urges, the actions of man or animal, or simply the nature of all living things. Spiral is no less cryptic. At the bottom of the titular spiral is a collection of short statements: hand of a father, hand of a mother, heart of a child, mind of a demon. And after that is a very confusing display with an entity who seems very nervous. I'll be completely honest, I can't even begin to glean any sort of meaning from whatever's going on here. Finally, there's special shower, a long hallway decorated with tiles and rusted pipes that leads to a room whose roof gives way to the elements, letting in the soothing sounds of a forest. Further progress down the hallway is blocked by a series of pipes and a bathtub that has a curled-up figure within. Getting too close causes them to stand up, revealing them to be a human with bluish-green hair and a large crown, who's been skeletonized from the neck down. Though this lack of muscle and flesh doesn't stop them from hitting that shit. It's only through the developer that we know this person to be named Prince, but that doesn't exactly answer any questions. So with very few answers, we'll continue on to entrance. Real-world tip. There's a Mariana Trench under every town. After falling deep within the earth, we find ourselves at the bottom of the Mariana Trench, or perhaps just one of many such trenches. It's dark, murky, and underwater if the bubbles in front of us are to be believed, though this doesn't slow our progress through this place. A place inhabited by nothing else besides strange girl structures which float happily while remaining silent. These things that are tough like beef jerky are of no interest to us, pushing onwards into the spiraling glowing white symbols which lead into yet another temple-like structure. A structure that houses the throne of the queen, as this trait informs us, and upon this throne lies the sacred dermis, shed by the queen as she entered her great metamorphosis, a hallowed place. And beneath it, a path that leads right into the center of the earth, looking far more mechanical than molten, with the eggs of the earth circling above the pulsing mass before us. But it's more than that. This is the life meat of the world. Through finger movements that come naturally, words never before spoken, yet always known, shaped and kneaded with a warmth, a love, made anew. Born to flesh from ash and clay, a wonderful child is brought forth, brought into a world that has been twisted and changed into something it is not. But perhaps such change is inevitable. There will be no more secrets, for she sees all within her domain, and thus Pompey sprouts her glorious insect wings and takes flight, leaving this hole, never looking back. No longer a random, schizophrenic nutcase who was one conspiracy too far from ending up in the White Room, but instead the awakened dragonfly queen, the one revered and worshipped by the Thrates, Saveshna Vishniri, the queen of Venus, the start of a grand new rebirth, and the end of Psychopomp. Or is it? Are there truly no more secrets? The main menu certainly doesn't think so, encouraging us to continue, which one should do after listening to the title screen song. It's pretty good. Finding ourselves on the world map once more, it would appear that a new location has, well, appeared. But before silent reading time can begin, it's time for one of the two additional options on the world map. It's time for Venus to go home. Damn, bitch. You live like this? After a bit of a perspective shift, we end up in the average apartment that $5K rent a month will get you in New York City. All in all, not too bad. Slap a poster or two on the wall and maybe buy an air fryer. You'll be golden. More importantly is this doorway blocked off by a familiar symbol, which finally gives a purpose to the keys. Passing through causes this normal, if not a bit grimy interior to quickly give way to the rusted machinery and decaying concrete we've grown used to. Home is also home to some interesting NPCs, who will be sprinkled throughout the areas we traverse. with passage to each area being locked behind the same barrier. So I hope you've been keeping up with your key collection. But getting back to those NPCs, they're as diverse as the locations you'll find them in. From a certified overcast weather hater to a mechanical entity that brings into question the authenticity of the Psychopomp. Is it all just a placebo, or is its efficiency at 0% because it's not allowing the reading of minds as intended despite having other unexpected effects? Oh, and of course, here's sexual desire given form. A strangely familiar form, to be exact. At one point, the concrete gives way to flesh, and that flesh eventually leads to a massive brain, seemingly hinting that home could very well be Venus's mind or subconscious. This place is certainly messed up enough for it to seem like a plausible theory, that's for sure. Traveling onwards past the brain leads to the usual gameplay perspective we're accustomed to, finding ourselves in a lush, tranquil place. Some sort of temple or garden hidden deep within a flourishing forest. Greenery of any kind is rarely encountered within the game besides a few rare, fleeting moments. So such an abundance feels like quite the tonal shift. There's also a vibrant red planet that hangs in the night sky, and further along the path is a clearing where two figures stand side by side in front of a structure. We get to listen in on their conversation, though perhaps it'd be more fitting to say that we're remembering this conversation, as one of the two speakers is a dragonfly-loving girl with a preference for hammers who introduces herself as Venus, but only after bullying the poor boy into introducing himself as Mercury. He has a fondness for nails and believes his favorite bug, the beetle, is way cooler than a dainty little dragonfly. They share childish banter back and forth, signaling the start of what I can only imagine will be a very happy friendship with no issues whatsoever going forward. And finally, this flashback, as we're assuming it to be, concludes with a short visual of all the planets in orbit, all of them X'd out, with the exception of Mercury and Venus. This could be taken two ways. Either this is a representation of the present, with only the planets Mercury and Venus remaining, or this is the past, as that one rather dubious archaeological paper stated. The ancient textiles seem to claim that the Queen of Venus and the King of Mercury created the heavenly bodies themselves, though personally I'd lean more towards the former. Now there will be plenty of time for theories after we've got all the facts, which means it's time to drop by the Forbidden Library location. Quite the disappointing library, mind you. Only thing I found in the rather pitiful manga section was Volume 2 of Backstabbed in a Backwater Dungeon. My trusted companions tried to kill me, but thanks to the gift of an unlimited gacha, I got level 9,999 friends, and I'm out for revenge on my former party members and the world. Worst part is I couldn't even find Volume 1. Some sick bastard out there is actually reading that thing. The only thing worth reading is this one page of an article discussing an interstellar phenomenon that's been occupying the skies for the last month or so, dubbed the Caldman 4, likely due to the 4 brilliant bright lights that were clearly visible. This collection of lights appeared as if they were carving through the stars and sky itself, leaving a pitch-black nothingness in their wake. Naturally, this wasn't actually the case, as this was just an example of the Heath-Nidale phenomenon, which is very real and is how light is absorbed into the trail of the Caldman 4 to then be expelled out the sides, known as the photon edge. Now, it would appear as if something, or more specifically, 4 somethings, ain't too pleased about us snooping around and discovering this place. But there's nobody more displeased than Venus herself, because after leaving the library, the entrance location has become an exit. Exiting causes a new cutscene to play, with the outline of Venus looking more distorted and alien as she breaks out, or breaks free.
Connection to subject lost. Tracking alternative subject. Alternative subject found. Time to wake up.
And so wakes the slumbering king. Kusner Colvin, the king of Mercury, awakens in a dingy-ass motel in the middle of New Mexico or something. Breaking Bad reference. It's a dry and dusty desert with nothing much of note besides the big red earth in the sky. But allow me to quickly introduce Mercury here. He's what one might describe as a Sigma male, a business-minded individual, if the suit and tie didn't already give that away. He comes across as more calm and collected, which is far removed from our main protagonist, a contrast which is made even more apparent when he finds the thought of conversing with an inanimate object like a vending machine to be absolutely absurd. Conversing with the man, or man's best friend, who is seemingly here to greet and pick him up though, now that's something Mercury can do. King-to-king communication, if you will, as the king of all dogs is here to introduce himself and quickly explain the situation. Apparently, some thing has awoken from the bloody earth, and only Mercury possesses the ability to stop whatever it is that is rapidly approaching this location. Welcome to the Epilogue. There's only one possible location on the world map, so it's time to go to the meeting place, which seemingly still takes place within the same desert environment, just at a temple or something. Despite calling us over for a meeting, it seems like the king of all dogs can't keep track of his compatriots, so the task falls upon us to round them up. I would think less of him for this, if not for his smarmy, confident attitude. Definitely the sort of canine who'd perform well within a corporate setting. Like Air Bud, but in Wall Street. So off we go to find his three companions while dealing with the creatures within this location using Mercury's iconic nail. The first of his associates being Mother, a figure wearing a flowing cloak, from beneath which the sound of slick, leathery skin rubbing together can be heard. The source of this odd noise can be roughly guessed by her peculiar interest in snakes, and more importantly, her handshake feels like it flows through the hands. You'll notice that more often than not, Mercury goes for a handshake when able, and when it won't lead to dog fur getting on his pristine velvet gloves, further emphasizing himself as a business-centric individual. While seeking out the other two colleagues, we can come across two Aberrant scouts, who appear to be some sort of insect, centaur species, very imposing and powerful in appearance, though not really giving off a threatening aura towards us. Much like the king of all dogs, one warns of an incoming storm and how a great evil hangs over this land. May the king watch over you. Interesting. Next to be encountered is the father, fresh from an Elvis Presley look-alike contest where he came in second place behind this sick-ass dog. His smug face sends a chill down the spine, and his obsession seems to be for flowers, how its beauty can captivate, yet it could also become a deadly poison if processed. Gives me weird vibes, and his soft, touching handshake goes on for a little bit too long. Last to be found and informed of the meeting is the child, whose appearance feels deceiving somehow. Their special interest in puppets does very little to appease this uneasy feeling, nor does their surprisingly firm handshake. But it's best to not linger on such distractions. One should focus on the task at hand. And with all of them gathered, it's time for the meeting to commence. Or would be, if not for the fact it appears we're a step too late. So, a cheeky tease for Psychopomp 2, along with a short snippet of the banger that is Toe Walker. Also, third-person mode, which is pretty neat. And that's it. We've done it. Okay, well, maybe not. We can't dive into insane conspiracy theories and deranged lore speculation just yet, because we've got a few calls to make first. The phone is pretty simple. The way it works is that much like a normal phone numpad, each number correlates to 3 letters. For example, 9676 comes out to worm, and then we get to hear a voice speaking rather harshly towards our silly little ground-dwelling invertebrates.
Left in the dirt, left to rot.
Or perhaps it's meant to imply something other than worms, some other species that was forced to rot within the dirt, beneath the darkness of the world. But it's anyone's guess, really. The level of crypticness for each call varies wildly, with some being quite straightforward. King is just the phone for a certain motel that's unfortunately fully booked, with its only guest currently still sleeping at the time of calling.
Thanks. Bye.
Wild is simply a man recalling a rather odd dream, running through a big, open field, one that felt like it could go on forever, ever repeating. A rather wild dream, you could say. Wait, dream? Wild? Oh, god damn it. That one does not count. It's very clearly referencing the game. But while we're here, please play DreamWild, please, I'm begging you. Now, dogs is rather hard to pin down. You might initially think it's connected to the king of all dogs, but it's hard to find any connection within its content. Bugs is also interesting, in particular the line about these damn worlds they create. As we know, Venus and Mercury have a connection to dragonflies and beetles, and likely created the civilizations on their own world, along with possibly Earth and more. Then there's Body, the longest of the calls, which speaks of a disturbing dream. A flayed woman in a bathtub, carved down to her skeleton as she splashes and plays in her own severed flesh. It's actually incredibly similar to the special shower location, which even has a small forest opening, possibly coinciding with the yard mentioned during the call. And finally, we've got 4.
Hey everybody, let's have fun today. What kind of fun do I have in mind? I've got a game to play. What kind of game is it? Well, let's say it's a game of tricks. It's a game of traps and twists and turns. But I think you're really gonna enjoy it. And I think we're all gonna get along just fine.
Now, 4, both the number and call, is an excellent jumping-off point when discussing the mostly vague and strange lore of Psychopomp. The call seems to emphasize fun, and there's another document that does the same, being the Fun Poem, which also has an illustration of 4 characters, who upon a second viewing should be looking more familiar. Father, mother, child, and if a certain spiraling side location is somehow connected, demon. Of course, such names actually mean very little, as this isn't truly just a happy family, and it's unlikely that child is even the offspring of father and mother to begin with, because there's one more important grouping of 4, the Caldman 4, an interstellar phenomenon that seems to have come from outside our solar system and even possibly galaxy. In a universe where the planets Mercury and Venus can also be some sort of living, spiritual entity, it's not too far-fetched to assume the same for these 4 bright lights. And much like we've learned of Venus shifting and changing forms, the current forms of the Caldman 4 are likely just for convenience, further supported by the rather piercing gazes we received within the Forbidden Library, as if some powerful entities were observing our progress. I'll now attempt to very roughly explain what I believe to be the events of this story as we know it so far. Keep in mind that a majority of this is theories at best and borderline mental delusions at worst. Now then, 13.8 billion years ago, the occurrence of the Big Bang was the theorized start of the universe. I'm just kidding, we're not going that far back. 4.6 billion years ago, a dense cloud of interstellar gas and dust collapsed and eventually led to the formation of our sun, and more importantly, the solar system as a whole. It's hard to say exactly how much of our reality carries over to this work of fiction, but Venus's spiritual age coincides with the age of her planet, and it's likely the same for Mercury. We can't say for certain if each of the heavenly bodies have their own king, queen, etc., especially with the only real hint towards this idea being the X'd-out planets and possibly the existence of Prince. So, going forward, we'll be assuming that it's just Mercury and Venus. With that said, the events that occurred between the solar system popping into existence and the arrival of the Caldman 4 is hard to organize. I'd say that Venus and Mercury first developed their own planets, with the Thrates residing on Venus and the Everans on Mercury. Then we have the first meeting between our dysfunctional duo, and eventually, with their combined knowledge and previous experience with their own planets, cooked up Earth and humans, or simply developed an already existing Earth by adding humans. Honestly, the order doesn't matter too much, just that the planets and their populace existed when the Caldman 4 arrived, likely sometime in the late 1900s to early 2000s. After arriving, it would appear that one way or another they put Mercury and Venus on ice, not through pure power, as they seem to panic quite a bit when a pissed-off Venus is hurtling towards them near the end of the game, but rather through manipulation, something we experience firsthand both as Venus and Mercury. There seems to be some implication that Mercury was tricked into fighting Venus, like the female torso impaled through the chest with a nail within the art gallery, and the ending song having lyrics that speak of being told to find and cut somebody up. There's also the Game Over song that plays whenever you die. Besides the striking imagery, there's the lyrics, "She took my eye." And when playing as Mercury, once his health gets low enough, his abstracted face seems to melt away, leaving a single, empty socket. We can even see the Caldman 4 attempting to convince Mercury to fight Venus again during the epilogue. But what does this fun-loving family want? Well, they appear to simply travel through space, snuffing out stars and planets either for energy, resources, or purely entertainment. And apparently, humans are incredibly fun to play with. Perfect toys that unfortunately appear to break a bit too easily. So the Caldman 4 stick around to toy with humans. But eventually, supplies can't keep up with demand, possibly even completely destroying Earth itself. It looks as if they attempted to create humans of their own to make up for the loss, leading to evolved humans who are poor imitations that just don't squish right. And so comes the brilliant plan to awaken Venus and likely later Mercury in order to have them recreate humans while remaining ignorant of the Four's existence, reuniting that king and queen and making worlds anew. This leads to the planets Venus and Mercury being disguised as Earth, with the events of the game most likely taking place on the Bloody Earth, which is the planet Venus. I can't say for certain if Venus actually spent 23 years living mostly mindlessly as a human working an office job before going full schizophrenic and crafting the Psychopomp, or if she was fed false memories while within her cocoon, before eventually emerging, believing she'd lived that false life, which influenced her metamorphosis. The self-portrait note, assumedly written by Venus, could imply either or. And then, the events of the game happen. Venus travels through fragments of what used to be, now surrounded by poor imitations of the world she created. Places like the factory or lower wing could be where the memories and knowledge of Earth that get pumped into the evolved humans are gathered and kept. For example, the note found in the sewer discussing the Earth having lost mass is because the memories of a researcher who knew the real dimensions and mass of Earth was put into an evolved human, leading to it being confused when taking measurements of the bloody Earth. That's my thoughts, at least. There's not much else to currently say about the other areas. Hard structures seems to be the source of all new buildings and even cars, while there's likely many human seedbeds to produce the evolved humans. Given the fact we don't even know what the planet was like before all this happened, we can't say for certain if something like the Rust Mothers were made by the Caldman 4, or if that's simply how rust was actually handled on Venus. And the use for the eggs of the Earth isn't exactly clear, seeming to just be required to obtain the life meat of the world, though the embryo imagery certainly isn't missed. Speaking of the life meat, the initial ending of the game seems to be what the Caldman 4 wanted to happen. Having this resident psych ward patient remember she's the Queen of Venus before leaving to create new life. However, the second ending, as you could call it, has her finding mention of the Caldman 4 within the Forbidden Library, seemingly sparking her blocked memories of them and causing the Caldman 4 to hastily wake up Mercury as they've lost control of Venus. And that's about the limit of what I can say before I end up writing pure fanfiction. There might be different angles to view this story from, and more digging through lore to be done, but I'll save that mental effort for if and when Psychopomp 2 releases, which could be a while. With that said, thanks for watching, and I'd also like to give thanks to my generous patrons, along with an extra special thanks to Rhodey, Mir Loon, Yuval, Michael Bradley, BeanOS, and Wobble Obble. They get videos a day early, along with updates on video progress, and even helping to decide what I cover next. So if that sounds interesting, consider checking out my Patreon, or simply just like and subscribe, as that also helps. And remember, the insect is not real. Also, please play DreamWild for the love of God.